you think nobody knows anything about the fairy folk of legend and lore? Well, you would be wrong. Technically, we know quite a bit about them, verified by a very credible witness who history records actually met them on occasion. Before we describe that meeting in detail, let's take a look first at some of the intriguing fairy facts that he learned during his meeting with the fairies. Some people have the second sight, which allows them to see fairies. This sight is often inheritable, and especially if you are the seventh son. It was said the spiritual power of birthed children is more and more up to the seventh, and then proceeds to go back down. Aha, so given the nuclear family is about 1.5 kids nowadays, no wonder no one's seeing fairies nowadays, right? But regardless, so those with second sight have reported that fairies are something between humans and angels, not exactly akin to either. Not considered demons or fallen angels, due largely to the fact that they are peaceful beings, more than willing to spend, say 1,000 years or so, simply sitting around the fire together, sharing stories, singing songs, and dining on dainty little fairy cakes. Like hobbits basically, only fairies. They are often called the good folk, in fact, whereas, as we all know, those fallen angel demons, on the other hand, are basically just drama queens, as they say, always stirring up trouble or strife, or flying monkeys to decimate humanity or whatever. So, another detail known about the fairies is that they always live underground or in trees, and are more than capable of changing form at will. Often they live in hills called fairy mounds. They are capable of invisibility, but are most often to materialize during the dusk or the dawn. In the mists of twilight is when they can most often be seen. Often appearing as the typical pixie-like winged fairies we all know, but quite capable of transforming into anything, be it a bird or a cat or what have you. And were even often known, in fact, to appear to a person as themselves. Often called a co-walker or doppelganger as we know them. Sometimes they do this to assist a human being for some personal reason, but occasionally just to be a nuisance. These creatures are a bit naughty and mischievous now and then. Every once in a while, they do disguise themselves for some wicked or harmful reason, but usually because you have offended them. At which point, expect revenge, as they're quite known for having a bit of a petty streak when insulted. These beings may well live for thousands of years, it seems, and yet they aren't immune to death. For this reason, they have deep, very old relationships with each other, and hold marriages, funerals, or celebrations of birth just like we humans do. Imagine, if you will, spending a few tranquil and peaceful centuries spinning yarns with your wife of 1,000 years and those few fairy friends whose songs, manners, and scintillating and magical charm have never bored you for many a millennia. Long centuries of wine, song, and good company, basking in the glow of a few thousand-year-old friendships. That's the fairy life, in fact. One catch in that unrelenting peace and comfort is that fairies seem to need to move with every turn of the season. Whether a tradition or if they're forced to, nobody knows, but as spring changes to summer and summer to fall and so on, they move from one subterranean fairy mound to another. It was said when such fairy courts would be on the move, supernatural winds would blow. In the old days, men could identify these fairy winds and laid low until they passed. Although not usually malignant, it might be wise to lay low as they pass. Fairies are known to value politeness, detesting foul language, or any lack of common courtesy. So, accidentally letting out a few choice four-letter words as you stub your toe on a tree stump, as you just so happen to tread underneath the wind of a traveling fairy court, could well earn you a couple of barrages of fairy shot, that being the magical missiles that fairies were known to fire at people who earned their contempt. Due to their bodies, which were likened to a condensed cloud, being changeable and able to reform themselves at will, it was not really possible to kill them. And even if wounded, their knowledge of natural medicine, herbs and spells of healing and the like, was so great they could easily regenerate with supernatural speed and soon be whole again. For this reason, their occasional feuds and wars between fairy clans are often more for show, to soothe their bruised egos from some slight that has offended them. As said, they do tend to get triggered. One real danger of the fairies, however, is their tendency to raid the fridge. Your fridge, to be exact. Yes, fairy cakes are great and all, and their food is reported to taste divine. However, there is some odd quality of their food that causes it somehow to be lacking in the substance and nutrition of our human food. Despite its magical deliciousness, human food has that earthiness of real nutrition and substance. So fairies in fact envy it. They steal it in the dark of night, with a fondness especially for some of the earthier human fare, such as butter and milk, eggs or honey. Being mostly intangible creatures, however, they rarely eat the actual food, but rather its essence, which they down like candy. This is the reason why the seemingly nonsensical tradition of leaving milk and honey out for a house spirit and to see that it was not at all consumed during the night was actually not nonsensical at all. They did eat it, you see, quintessentially, in its essence, even if it might appear to you that they haven't been touched. This habit of stealing food could take on some dangerous forms at times, however, because the fairies could well suck all the nutrition and essence and life out of your food, causing entire fairy-afflicted households to waste away as if they were starving, even though they are stuffing themselves, because all the food in the house was eaten, so to speak, in its essence, or carried away to the nearby fairy mounds to grace the fairy tables. Don't have second sight? Well, lucky for you, one last fairy fact is that they produce a particular enchanted ointment called fairy ointment when, if found, could be applied to yourself to see the fairy folk and all of their hidden world just as clearly as if you were the psychic seventh son of a seventh son. Intriguing details to be sure, no? But how do we know this isn't all just nonsense? The fevered fantasies of some over-imaginative mind? Well, mainly because the witness who learned all these fairy facts was impeccably respectable and credible. Robert Kirk, a Scottish minister and Gaelic scholar who lived in the late 1600s, was renowned for his work, The Secret Commonwealth of Elves, Fauns, and Fairies. This book was a conglomeration, a collection of everything he learned from meeting, socializing, and even dining with the fairy folk. He was a seventh son, and so had the second sight, which allowed him to perceive the good folk. His most profound encounter with the fairy realm, when he learned most of these facts, occurred near Aberfoyle, Scotland, specifically near Doon Hill, a site long associated with fairy activity. One evening, in the summer of 1694, Kirk took his usual solitary walk on Doon Hill. It was well known that he frequently visited this site to meditate and possibly interact with the fairies. As dusk fell on Doon Hill, Kirk reportedly felt a sudden change in the atmosphere, a stillness and an electric charge in the air that he had come to recognize as a sign of the fairies' presence. Kirk described seeing a shimmering door open up before him. With a mix of awe and trepidation, he stepped through the portal and found himself in a subterranean realm of remarkable beauty. This realm was filled with a soft ambient light that seemed to come from the very air itself. He was greeted by the Seelie Court, the benevolent fairy aristocracy. These beings were strikingly beautiful, with delicate features, luminous skin, and eyes that sparkled like gemstones. They wore clothes that shimmered and shifted in color, reflecting the magical nature of their world. Kirk was invited to a grand banquet, laid out on a table made of living wood that seemed to grow from the ground. The food and drink were unlike anything he had ever seen. Fruits that glowed with an inner light, and drinks that sparkled as if filled with liquid stardust. despite the traditional warnings about not consuming fairy food, Kirk partook in the feast, feeling an overwhelming sense of peace and belonging. Throughout the banquet, the fairies spoke to him in a melodic language that he somehow understood. They shared secrets of their world, speaking of a natural balance and their role in maintaining it. They revealed that they had chosen to reveal themselves to Kirk because of his deep respect for their existence and his scholarly work on the supernatural. Kirk noted that time seemed to flow differently in the fairy realm. What felt like mere moments or hours in this enchanted place could equate to days or longer in the human world. This distortion of time was a common theme in many fairy tales and added to the otherworldly nature of his experience. After the feast, Kirk was gently guided back to the portal by the fairies. As he stepped out of the hill, he found himself standing on Dune Hill once more, but the night had passed and dawn was breaking. He felt a strange sense of both fulfillment and loss, as if he had been part of something profoundly significant, yet transient. Kirk documented his experiences in his writings, noting the fairies' warnings about revealing too much of their secrets. Despite this, he felt compelled to share his knowledge, believing that understanding the fairy realm could enrich human understanding of the world. Not long after, he was found dead on Dune Hill. Some accounts say he collapsed while walking. Others suggest he vanished and his body was found later. Local legend quickly interpreted his death as the fairies taking him away because he had divulged their secrets to the world. Robert Kirk's work and his encounters have left a lasting impact on the study of folklore. The Secret Commonwealth remains a key text in understanding 17th century Scottish beliefs about fairies. Kirk's detailed descriptions of his experiences provide a rare and intriguing glimpse into the fairy world as it was perceived in his time. While the veracity of his encounter could certainly be doubted, there's no doubt in the mind of historians that Kirk believed that he experienced what he did. It definitely makes for an interesting story anyways, bringing up the thought irresistibly, as if conjured by a fairy spell, of what might happen to us if we ever find ourselves walking on Dune Hill on some fateful day. Well, that just about wraps up tonight's tale from Lorehound. Join us as we sniff out more of history's most interesting stories.
As the hound dog entered the dimly lit library, he sensed an aura of mystery surrounding the ancient scrolls. The dusty shelves towered above him as he sniffed his way through the labyrinth of books. Suddenly, he picked up a scent and followed it to a secluded corner. With bated breath, he approached the shelf and pawed at the book, revealing the hidden scroll. As he rolled it out, he knew he had discovered a treasure worth protecting at all costs.